Joining me now on News9 Live is a very special guest. I'm joined from Tel Aviv by Ms. Tal Heinrich. She's the spokesperson for the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Ms. Heinrich, thank you so much for speaking to us. First and foremost, my heartfelt condolences over the horrific loss of lives in Israel.
Thank you, Neha, and thank you, the Indian people, for the moral support that we are receiving here in Israel. It is all being felt on the ground. We're very appreciative of it.
Absolutely. The Indian Prime Minister made it abundantly clear that the people of India stand with the people of Israel in this difficult hour. But let me talk to you about, the counter-offensive that's been launched by Israel. There have been days and days of airstrikes. How soon can we expect a ground invasion of Gaza?
So I cannot go into detail and talk about the specific tactical and military operation moving ahead. It's something that is being discussed in the highest levels here in Israel, the military brass and our government. And when the time is right, one can expect that Israel will move into stage 2 and stage 3 of the operation in Gaza to dismantle Hamas. What we can say is that the goal of what we're doing in Gaza right now is very clear, and we stated it from day one, and that hasn't changed. We want to make sure that by the end of this, Hamas will no longer have the military capabilities to hurt us as they did on the October 7th massacre. We will destroy their military wing and their governance bodies.
Okay, that very clearly is your end game. But, I'm going to ask you this. You and the Prime Minister have said we're going to wipe out Hamas and change the political leadership of Gaza. We're not interested in controlling life in Gaza. But then some people are asking who's going to replace Hamas? And with Iran's support, is there really a guarantee that the new regime will not challenge Israel going forward?
These are all very good questions that we will address and that are being discussed right now in the highest levels. We have different contingency plans. We're also discussing them with international partners. These are not only discussions that we hold amongst ourselves, but as I said before, we are not there yet. First, in order to really address these questions, we have to complete stage 1. And stage 1 means taking out Hamas. We have decided as a nation that we can no longer live next to an existential genocidal threat, the threat that Hamas poses. What happened on October 7th, this massacre can never, ever happen again. And this is why we're going to hit them very hard, because we want to change the reality in Gaza for the next decades. We cannot allow that to happen again. We cannot allow them to have the motivation to hurt us again. That's why we're operating.
Absolutely. But are there concerns that, the 222 hostages that they're holding, most of them Israeli, could be, in serious danger once that ground invasion happens? What's the thought process on that?
The fate and the condition of 222 Israeli hostages in Gaza right now it's the top of mind for every person in this country right now. We want to see them back home, and we will bring them back home. What we are doing is that we're calling on Hamas to immediately and unconditionally release them. We are also calling on the international community to stand by us and back our demand that the Red Cross pays them a visit and examines their condition. And we warn, our Prime Minister warns these Hamas terrorists, do not hurt them, do not touch them, because you will pay a price. We want to see them back. There are so many children there. There are babies there. There's an 85-year-old Holocaust survivor there. This is a crazy situation. And keep in mind that the number that I just told you, it doesn't mean that it's a final number, because we are 17 days after that terrible massacre, that atrocity, and we still have between 100 and 200 Israelis who are unaccounted for. That means that there's a chance they're being held in captivity in Gaza by Hamas, like the other hostages, or that they are dead, but their bodies are in Gaza, or that they're dead, but their bodies are here in Israel. However, they are beyond recognition. We are still trying to identify some of the victims 17 days after they were slaughtered. The reason is because of the atrocities that Hamas committed. They burned them, they turned them into ashes. So it is very difficult to identify some of them.
Quite right. And, I have to say the butchery and the savagery that was on display has shamed humanity, and they really seem to have left Al Qaeda and ISIS behind. It's unimaginable, really. I hate to ask you this, but there are some apologists for Hamas who've actually disputed the claims made by Israel, saying, no, they're lying. Babies weren't beheaded. No, women were not raped. No, nobody was burnt alive. It's all propaganda by Israel. I wonder, does Israel think that it might want to share with the world the gruesome evidence of what actually happened on the 7th of October at some point in time going forward?
That's a good point. And in fact, just this morning, we did. Some of these atrocities that they committed, I understand that it is just beyond the comprehension of normal people, of civilized people like you, me, and your viewers. These atrocities that they committed are so graphic, the torturing and the raping. I mean, I can just describe some of the testimonies that we heard over the last days of, children being killed and their body parts were chopped in front of their parents' eyes taken out before they murder these people. The raping, the way they burned babies in their cribs, it's unbelievable. So to your point, I know that some people in the civilized world cannot even believe some of these images, even when they're seeing them. So what we did is that we called on international journalists this morning. The IDF spokesperson unit did it, and they organized a special screening. I think it was about 40 or 50 minutes, I'm not sure, of a compiled video that presented all the footage that also Hamas recorded and boasted about, and they show them some of the atrocities. We cannot put out some of the things that they saw, but I'm sure that these international journalists will go back to their channels, their newspapers, and will scream to the world what they saw. And it's very important. It is terrible. You said it before. They are worse than ISIS, or international leaders who came here and saw it firsthand even repeated that. Some of them, Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, said these are the modern day Nazis. It's worse than ISIS in a sense that first, the atrocities that they committed, because I don't remember ISIS really beheading babies and burning babies and so on. And the second thing that is important to remember is that unlike ISIS, Hamas has a state sponsor behind them. They have Iran, that is providing more than 93% of their budget.
You're quite right. And since we are talking about Iran has openly threatened Israel, saying, our hands are on the trigger. Don't you dare go into Gaza, or else we will have to jump in. Is there a real concern that this conflict could widen? There's already been gunfire exchange with Hezbollah in Lebanon and Syria, and then Iran is constantly issuing threats. Do you believe that larger parts of the Arab world could get engulfed in this war? Of course, you have the US and the Western world in your corner.
Neha, we certainly hope not. We certainly hope this wouldn't be the case, and that Hezbollah, that is an Iranian proxy in Lebanon, fully backed by Iran, would not intervene and will not turn this into a full-fledged war on our northern front. But if we are required to address an emanating threat from Lebanon's territory, we will do so. And we will do so very, very decisively, just like what we're doing against Hamas right now, because we cannot live with monsters in the north and we can't live with monsters in the south. We will make sure that Israelis are safe and secure. We cannot allow, we're not going to compromise the security of our people. We have done so in the past when we were required to act on different fronts. In 1967, 1973, we had wars in which we were attacked on multiple fronts, and we won these wars because we know what it takes to survive in this neighborhood. And we will not tolerate this. And we will regard Lebanon responsible for any kind of threat emanating from its territory.
So you're hoping there is no multi-front war, but if there is one, Israel is fully prepared. Um, you know, I think I already know the answer to this, but I'm still going to ask you because it's my job as a journalist. Is a ceasefire completely out of the question? Because many humanitarian aid workers, the United Nations, are asking for an immediate ceasefire.
Yeah, that's a ceasefire is not negotiable. Demanding Israel for a ceasefire right now is basically saying that Hamas can get away with what they did, with the torturing, with the butchering, with the raping. We cannot allow that. President Biden was here and he came here, really paid an unprecedented visit in the middle of a war to speak of, the global moral leadership that the U.S. is giving us right now. And he said that we are facing an inflection point in history, and we are. We cannot allow terrorists to get away with their crimes because guess what? It will happen again and again and again. Just like was the case with ISIS, we're seeing this international coalition being formed in front of our eyes right now to confront Hamas. And that is very important because we need the civilized world to stand by Israel and stand against such atrocities and send out a very powerful global message that nobody in the year 2023 can get away with such crimes. We cannot tolerate that as a civilized world. So no, a ceasefire is out of the question because that is taking the pro-Hamas position right now.
Ceasefire is out of the question. Now, I would be remiss in my duty as a journalist if I did not ask you this question. It is my job to play the devil's advocate. There are many people who are saying what the New York Times has echoed today. There is an opinion piece in the New York Times today, and I'm quoting it. It says Israel has suffered a horrifying terror attack and deserves the world's sympathy and support, but it should not get a blank check to slaughter civilians or to deprive them of food, water, and medicine. We must not kill Gazan children to protect Israeli children. What would your response to that be?
Israel's not slaughtering civilians. The New York Times has it wrong. Hamas are the ones responsible for anything that is taking place in Gaza right now. We are not targeting civilians. We do not want to see civilians getting hurt or suffer, unlike Hamas. This is what they want. This is what they're doing. They are using their population as human shields. We are telling them to evacuate, move to the south. We have created designated safer havens for you where humanitarian aid is awaiting, where food, water, and medical supplies are available. This is what Israel is doing. We do not want civilians caught in harm's way. That is Hamas is doing. It serves their goals.
Okay, you're saying we're not killing civilians. However, the Palestinians say that more than 4,800 civilians have been killed. More than 1,000 of them were children. And the criticism in many quarters against Israel today is that it is countering atrocities with atrocities, war crimes with war crimes, and imposing a collective punishment on the Palestinian people for what Hamas did. What would you say to those people?
Again, Israel is not targeting civilians. We did not start this war. We do not want this war. We didn't even expect this war. We were dragged into this war by Hamas when they butchered us on October 7th. Now, again, we don't want civilians to get hurt. However, in every conflict since the beginning of history, in every war, even in justified wars like this war that is just, there are unfortunate civilian casualties, but these casualties are not on Israel's hands. They are the result of Hamas's doing.
The blood is on their hands, you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as more and more people die in Gaza, and we're told most of them are civilians, are you concerned that the world's stand might shift in the coming days? The mood may turn against Israel somewhat. There is no doubt that there's been tremendous support and sympathy for Israel in the first few days after the horrific 7th October attacks. But are you concerned that the mood could change as the death toll in Gaza goes up?
We expect the civilized world to stand by us when we were victims and when we are victorious. When we were victims on October 7th of Hamas's butchering, and when we will be victorious once we are done with Hamas. Our cause is the just cause. We are on the global front lines of the war against terrorism right now. So we want the support of the civilized world. We don't need the support of anyone else but the civilized world.
And you believe it will continue?
We hope it will continue. And we are getting very reassuring messages of support and solidarity from so many world leaders. And, so many around the world, individuals, I'm not even talking about the leaders, are writing to us, are showing support, are asking us, how can we help Israel? What can we do? The support is incredible because people in the world, in the civilized world, are smart people. They know how to tell the difference between right and wrong. And that is why they support Israel. And we are grateful for their support because moral clarity is so important right now.
All right. Russia and China have been very critical of Israel, along with some Arab countries. One wonders if the conflict could, in fact, widen in the days ahead. But that apart, I also want to ask you, the Palestinians say that, Israel is going after Hamas. Hamas controls Gaza. There is no Hamas in West Bank. Why then is it that the number of Palestinians killed in West Bank this year is the highest in 2 decades? Why are Palestinians dying in West Bank when there is no Hamas there? Again, it's an
Oh,
allegation against Israel. What would you say?
in fact, there is Hamas there. There is Hamas there, and there's Palestinian Islamic Jihad there. We are acting in every front to secure the safety of our people. So as we said, we will not allow monsters in the south. We will not allow monsters in the north to act against us and risk our lives, our safety, and we will not allow that in the east. For that reason, the IDF has carried out an operation to arrest terrorists and people involved in terrorist activity, also in the area of Judea and Samaria. You refer to it as the West Bank. So that is the only reason why we are operating there. You know that in recent months and in recent years, so many terrorist activities that murderous terrorist activities that brought to the killing of our civilians have emanated from this area. So we are not taking chances right now. If you are involved in terrorist activity against Israel, against Israeli civilians, we will take action.
Okay. Of course, they call growing Israeli settlements in the West Bank as a grave provocation. But we will discuss that on another occasion. I want to ask you once again, what is Israel's end game? Yes, you want to wipe out Hamas, but what happens after that? Who's going to be in charge of Gaza? What happens next? There are some who are saying Israel is going into this war without actually having a clear idea of how it's going to end.
There are different contingency plans that are being discussed right now, but we cannot comment on these right now because we're not there yet. First, we have to complete stage one, and stage one means taking out Hamas. We have decided that Hamas can be no longer. We can no longer live next to a monstrous, murderous regime that threatens the lives of Israeli citizens. That is not a question. So first, we will complete this mission, and it will take time, our prime minister said, and we are all ready for that. We are backing our soldiers, and the entire nation is united. The civilian front, the military front, we are all focused on one thing and one thing alone, and that is dismantling Hamas. And once we do, it will be a great time to conduct another interview and talk about contingencies. That is not the time right now.
I understand. Point well taken. But you speak for the Prime Minister of Israel. So I have to ask you this. There is a perception that there is growing anger at home as well against Prime Minister Netanyahu, that people are angry, of course, with Hamas, but there is some anger that's been directed at the Prime Minister. There are many Israelis who've called for his resignation for his failure to prevent these unprecedented and devastating attacks, and also for his handling of the Gaza war. What would you say to that?
Neha, of course, there are internal Israeli discussions, political discussions that are taking place. But right now, we're not talking politics in this country. We are all united. We are we are focused on one mission alone, as I told you. And this unity amongst our people is also reflected in the unity government that was just formed. The war cabinet is focused on one thing alone. As a nation, we're not discussing the politics of right now. We will win. We will destroy Hamas. And then we can go back to doing what we do and discuss politics, but that is not the right time. It's not what we're doing. It's not where our minds are at. We are focused on the state of 222 hostages. We want to see them back. We want to see Hamas gone, and that's all.
Okay, the time will come to discuss politics. You're right, you have a unity government in place. But there are many who are also cautioning Israel. Of course, President Biden said, don't make the mistakes that America did after 9/11. There are some who are saying that once there is a ground invasion, there are going to be many, many dangers and risks involved for the Israeli troops. The biggest, perhaps, being the labyrinth of underground tunnels and bunkers that Hamas have built. And parallels are drawn with the Vietnam War, where the Americans paid a very heavy price. 12,000 of their soldiers died. Now, I'm not saying that the Israelis would not have factored this in, but my question is, are there huge risks involved there?
Wars are a dangerous thing. That is something that we bring in mind, and everyone around the world knows. But we didn't want this war, you see. We didn't start this war. We were dragged into this war by Hamas, and we are taking account and looking at all the different parameters. And again, I cannot comment and go into detail about military operational activity, but there are different parameters that are being examined and reviewed, and Israel will complete its mission in this operation. We will dismantle Hamas, and we will prevail as a nation. The story of the Jewish people doesn't end on October 7th, 2023. We've been around for some 3,500 years in our ancestral homeland. So we know what it takes to survive in this neighborhood, and we will do just that yet again.
I don't know if you would want to address this question right now, but I will ask you nonetheless. There are many who say that if Israel were to accept the two-state solution, the violence would end. Hamas would go back to being a political party, but it is Prime Minister Netanyahu who has all but decimated the construct of a two-nation state and is hell-bent on not letting it become a reality. What would you say to that, again, as somebody who represents the Prime Minister?
I will reply in a question, if you allow.
Sure.
Do you think Hamas terrorists are interested in a so-called two-state solution?
Doesn't look like they want peace, but the rest of the Palestinians do.
Hamas are not interested in a two-state solution. Hamas is a military wing. It's a governance body in the Gaza Strip. But you know what? Unfortunately, Hamas is also an ideology. And this ideology is often manifested in the chant from the river to the sea, which means a Judenrein, a Jewish free state between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River. And the October 7th massacre was in fact the manifestation of this chant, of this slogan that is so widespread. We will not let them complete their mission, the Hamas mission.
How long do you think this war could last?
Well, we have all the patience in the world because we are determined to complete our goal. And as our Prime Minister said, it will take as long as we need it to take. We're not going to budge. We're not going to change our objectives, our military objective. That has remained unchanged. We want to destroy Hamas.
Final question. Number one, do you have any thoughts on the unprecedented intelligence failure that led to these attacks? A lot has been said about that. It's shocked the world. One. And two, do you think 7th of October has changed Israel and the Israeli people and their psyche forever? The scars will be very, very difficult to heal.
We are not the same nation as we were at 6 a.m. on October 7th. We are a different nation right now. We are a nation in pain in deep pain and in mourning. Everyone in this country knows someone who was injured, killed, abducted, or someone who's serving on the front lines, someone who has joined the military reserve or the civilian effort to make sure that the people here are safe. So we're not the same nation. The implication and the aftermath of what had transpired here might take different shapes, and time will tell. You and I will have this conversation in a few months, a few years, and we will see where is the heart of hearts and the center of gravity of the Israeli public. Time will tell. Different conceptions are being re-examined now. People are changing their views. It's a very natural thing, obviously. But your other question, we usually take pride in our intelligence. And obviously, there was a major failure here. And tough questions have to be asked. These questions will be addressed as in previous conflicts, previous rounds. We have conducted inquiries because we have to draw important lessons from what happened here. We cannot ever let it happen again. But right now, it is not necessarily the best time and place to do it. We are drawing some lessons as we go, as we're acting, because it's important that we don't repeat them while we are fighting to defeat Hamas in Gaza. But some of the bigger questions that you raised are very, very important, of course, are things that will be addressed later on, not now, because we have to keep the focus on dismantling Hamas.
Well, you're quite right about that. Of course, there has been criticism of Prime Minister Netanyahu. Some say that the Egyptians had warned Israel, but the warnings were downplayed. And then there are others who say that the Prime Minister was too busy quelling dissent at home and took his eye off the ball. Any thoughts on that before we let you go?
No, unfortunately, we will have to conclude because this position has to be taken for other media hits right now. So you have very interesting questions, much more to discuss. Some of these questions, unfortunately, we cannot address right now because time will tell. And we will discuss some of the contingency once we have completed our mission, once Hamas is gone.
I understand your point. I must say, Tal Heinrich, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I wish we were talking under different circumstances, but I thank you for your time, for patiently answering all my questions. The people of India and outside, our viewers outside, are certainly going to listen to you with rapt attention. And like our Prime Minister has said, our thoughts and prayers are certainly with the people of Israel. And we hope also for humanity's sake that this war does come to an end. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Neha, and thank the people of India who stand by our side. Thank you.